founder, owner, and chief medical officer of the privately held Hope for Cancer treatment centers in Tijuana and Cancun, Mexico, that currently employs over 200 employees, with international locations in Bangkok, Thailand, and Colombia. He developed a holistic treatment philosophy known as the 7 key principles of cancer therapy that has been the basis of successful treatment of thousands of cancer patients and featured in his book, Hope for Cancer. Principles to remove fear and empower your healing journey. He is a well-sought speaker and educator at conferences worldwide and has extensive participation in viral online events such as The Truth About Cancer, docuseries, and symposia. He has authored scientific papers, online and print books, and articles. He is a developer of medical products, protocols, devices, and supplements with focus on cancer therapy and nutrition. Let us give a warm welcome to Dr. Antonio Jimenez.
Hello, hello. How are you, everyone? Good? Good. So, as everyone is sitting down and coming in, let's start with a story, because I like stories, right? Patients learn from our stories. They remember stories. So, there was a Indian chief and his faithful companion in South Africa that they went hunting every week for years and years. So one day, when they were going hunting, the Indian chief, he blew off his thumb accidentally with a shotgun as he was hunting. So the faithful companion said, "This is good. This is good." And that was the faithful companion's motto in life, was "This is good." And so the Indian chief said, "How could this be good? I just blew off my finger." And he said, "This is good." So as they're walking back to the village, the Indian chief, he imprisons his faithful companion because, he doesn't like what he's telling him. So he imprisons him. He recovers from his injury, with no thumb, of course. And every week he continues his hunting without his faithful companion, of course, because he's in jail. And so about a year later, he's hunting, and he gets kidnapped by the cannibals of another village. So they take him to the village, and the cannibals, what do cannibals do? They eat the people, right? But one of the laws in cannibalism is you can't consume a human being if they're missing a body part. So when they examined him, they saw that his thumb was missing. And so they let him go. And on his way back to the village, the Indian chief is thinking about what his faithful companion said, "This is good." And so he goes back to the prison and he says, "My faithful companion, I'm going to release you. And I'm very sorry that you were in jail for 1 year." And the faithful companion said, "This is good," right? What did he say? "This is good." So he said, "How could this be good? You've been in jail for 1 year." And he said, "Well, if I was with you hunting, I'm not missing any limbs or anything, so they would have eaten me. So this is good." And I like that story because oftentimes when we see cancer patients, we think it's all bad, right? But now in July 2019, we have a lot of options for cancer patients. We know a lot more now than we did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So this is a good time for us to learn as much as we can to be the true healer. And the true healer is not about all these electron chain transport, with all due respect, but it's about the inner spirit. And sometimes we all know as physicians, we have no answers, apparently, but we do have the answer when we seek the inner being, right? Whether we call it karma or intuition or microbiome feeling, gut feeling, right? Gut feeling. So it's a good time, and this is good. And so in today's talk, I'm going to describe the 7 key principles to cancer therapy that form the foundation of my work over the last almost 30 years. We know that cancer is increasing. Wow, my neck is going to hurt after a while, but this is good. This is good. So, cancer is increasing. It's going to surpass the deaths by cardiovascular disease, we know. In some countries, it already has. In the US, 1,600 patients die a day due to cancer. A day. And this is only increasing, as we know. And the gap in the survival is really between early stage disease and metastatic disease. And in research, 70 to 80% of the funds that is invested in cancer research is in studying the primary tumor. But 90% of patients succumb to cancer not from the primary tumor, but from the metastatic disease. So there has to be a paradigm shift in where this money is being spent. And it should be spent in studying the metastatic disease and not primary cancers. So the terrain, as we know, is paramount in the work that we do in restoring a patient's health and freeing them from cancer. So as integrative cancer physicians, let's look at a close eye of what that means. What are we really doing? Are we quacks? Because I made quackwatch.com a few years ago. And when you make quackwatch.com, you know that you're doing something right? Because they're looking at us. So in here, we evaluate all aspects of disease and wellness, including the spiritual and the emotional aspect of the individual. We also discover, of course, the underlying causes. Go at the root, not a Band-Aid approach. Also, as an integrative physician, we have a bias towards natural therapies, right? Because we're non-toxic in nature. And we have to really critically evaluate our outcomes. And for many years, as being in the trenches, seeing cancer patients every day, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, we often, and as physicians, we're not good in statistics and doing evaluations and all that. So we have to give what we do a higher status in the world, we have to look at what our outcomes is, what treatments are giving the best results. And I'll explain what we did at Hope for Cancer in a little bit. And we discover and integrate science-based therapies and technology. Because what we do is science-based. It's science-based. Whether the dark side doesn't accept it, that's their problem and their challenge, right? But we are doing science-based medicine. And then we have to partner with and engage with our patients. I remember the first week in medical school, they told us to see how the patient is walking into your office. But now when the doctor sees the patient, he's already in the bed, all the vitals have been done and so forth. So we lose that connection with our patients. So we should not forget about that. So this is truly what an integrative approach to cancer can look at. So now looking at some raw data by the NCI, National Cancer Institute, the surveillance, end stage, and epidemiology result data. So this is published, the cream of the crop data. If you look at all stages of cancer, this is 5-year survival. So as cancer becomes metastatic, the 5-year survival obviously drops significantly to 26.2% 5-year survival. And here you see the 5-year survival as it declines year by year. So when we look at what we do collectively at Hope for Cancer, 92% of the patients that come to us, and I'm sure the same happens with you, are stage 4. They've either failed conventional medicine and or when they were diagnosed, there was no treatment option in the conventional sense. And if we look at the data that we just saw from NCI, they really don't take stage 4 into account. So the data is not apples to apples, right? They manipulate the data. In prostate cancer, they only add about 7% of stage 4 cancer patients. In colon cancer, 22%, lung, 65%, stage 3 and 4, and breast is about 33%. So when we were doing our data analysis, we weren't really in the same ballpark as them because we have 92% of patients are in stage 4. And what did we find? We found that the 1-year survival in the National Cancer Institute data is 51.4%, and for Hope for Cancer is 94%. This is across the board. So this is a retrospective study with 365 patients. And this was done third party, so they randomly picked 365 charts of diverse types of cancers. And the second year, we are at about a 78.9% 2-year survival. And now that study is ongoing, we should have the 3-year data within the next couple of months. So they did a statistical prediction or calculation for 5 years, and they say that we will be at about 76.9% 5-year survival compared to NCI data, which you saw before at 26.2%. Well, I'm crossing my fingers, I'm praying, and I hope that, in 5 years we find this to be true. But as we see, we're heading in the right direction. And mind you, this is at Hope for Cancer, but when we say we, I talk collectively because there's a lot of you, all of you here who treat cancer that are doing wonderful work. And this is probably very close to the results that you can or are obtaining in your medical work as well. So if we look by cancer type, we see NCI data in the dark orange, and we see the Hope for Cancer data in the light color. Lung cancer, colon, breast cancer, prostate, and pancreatic cancer. I just was speaking with a doctor here, and she said that in Malaysia, pancreatic cancer is pretty common. And we're seeing the same thing in the Western world. In Mexico, in the US, pancreatic cancer is becoming more and more a rising incidence in pancreatic cancer. So the fundamental law of integrative cancer therapy is to realize that cancer is an intelligent process. I don't know if your patients, when you ask your patients, what did your oncologist tell you if you ask the oncologist, hey doc, why did I get cancer? I do intermittent fasting, I'm plant-based, I exercise, my husband loves me, my kids are good, and why did I have this cancer? And the doctor will ask one question usually, the oncologist, is there cancer in your family? Does your father, uncle, brother, sister, cat, dog have cancer? And if you say yes, what do they say? That's why you have it. But if you say no, then I heard patients tell me that their oncologist told them it's bad luck. Or it's in your cards. Or what you must have done something to deserve this. Or the worst one is that God gave you this cancer because you sinned. Imagine that, right? So cancer is not bad luck. God doesn't give anyone cancer, and cancer is an intelligent process. And because of that, it tries to survive. Cancer is a survival organism. It goes through all costs to try to survive. So fortunately, we know these mechanisms already, at least what we know now in July 2019. And they were described by a previous speaker, but I want to go into them one by one because we need to really understand these and focus a little bit more on this. So these are common hallmarks or characteristics of all cancer. So if a patient calls you or goes to your office and say, hey doc, do you treat leiomyosarcoma? Or do you treat neuroendocrine carcinoma of the tail of the pancreas? My answer is, I'm not treating a cancer type, right? We're treating the mechanisms of disease. We're going to the root cause of what's happening, and this is what we're talking about now. So the first hallmark or characteristics of cancer is that it bypasses growth suppressor signals from the body. It shuts down the p53, for example, which is the guardian of the genome. Secondly, it releases uncontrolled growth signals. And if you want to take a picture, wait till the end because all of them are there, or else you'll take a lot of photos. And the third one is that it demonstrates social intelligence. It has been shown that cancer cells are communicating with each other. They're transferring information, a very well thought out process. It's not random. Fourth, it exhibits, it mutates. There's antigenic drift, antigenic shift, so that it bypasses the immune system. Number 5, of course, is that it alters its own genes, right? And it's very important what a previous speaker said, because if someone has metastatic disease, let's say to the liver, and there's multiple tumors in the liver, one tumor can have up to 100 genetic mutations or different receptor sites, and the tumor next to it can have up to 100 different genetic mutations or receptor sites. So those gene-targeted therapies and immunotherapies that are highly toxic are going to give, if at all, is going to give some short-lived results, but not medium or long-term. Number 6 is that cancer cells are masters in evading the immune system. So not only do we have to optimize our patient's immune system, we have to optimize the immune system's recognition of the cancer process, cancer cells. So here's a few details on how cancer subverts the innate immune system. We know, remember, there's the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system, and here we're talking about dendritic cells. So the immune system is able to make these dendritic cells, convert them from immunomodulatory to immunosuppressive. It also affects the macrophages, the inhibiting T cell activity and promoting angiogenesis. A tumor or lymph node that's malignant cannot get bigger than 2 millimeters in size without increased blood supply, angiogenesis. So at Hope for Cancer, we measure every patient's angiogenesis if it's seen by an ultrasound, for example, the breast, the liver, lymph nodes, axillary, inguinal. So it's very important to see what the vascular flow is in that diseased tissue prior to starting treatment and then periodically thereafter. We have about a 48% decrease in angiogenesis in 3 weeks of therapy on average. We did some retrospective different evaluations of patients. And of course, natural killer cells are neutralized as well, and the release of some cytokines are either upregulated or downregulating depending on the cytokine involved. And here we see the subversion of the adaptive immune system. Cancer cells alter the balance between T helper and Treg cells to favor immunosuppression. So cancer cells go into this pathway for suppressing T cell activation and bypassing the T helper cell pathway. So the other one is cancer stem cells. 1 cubic centimeter of a tumor. So if a patient has a tumor in the breast that measures 1 by 1 by 1, that's 1 cubic centimeter. There's approximately 1 billion, with a B, 1 billion cancer cells in 1 cubic centimeter of a tumor. Of those 1 billion, about 99% of those cells are called non-cancer stem cells. Those are the cells that are sensitive to chemo and radiation. So when someone has radiation and chemo and there's a significant decrease in tumor size, And the doctor's so happy because now the PET scan and MRI CAT scan shows that, there's good results. But they forget about the 1% that are called cancer stem cells. And those become more resistant and more active with chemotherapy. So every day, someone that has cancer, they're releasing about 1 million cancer cells into the bloodstream. Fortunately, the immune system is taking care of most of them, but about 0.01% of those cells are not killed by the immune system, and they either become dormant or are active. Those are the so-called circulating tumor cells. You've heard about that, right? CTC, circulating tumor cell, and those are the bad guys. Those are the guys that are going to metastasize and lead to progressive disease. So another characteristic of hallmark of cancer is cancer cells recruit healthy cells. So at the University of Iowa, there was some evidence that showed that this is a cancer cell, this is a healthy cell. So you'll see this cancer cell recruiting a healthy cell. What they found is that there's like a lasso, a rope, that's emitted by the cell membrane of the cancer cells to recruit healthy cells and make that tumor enlarge. So you'll see that now in this video here. So this is well published, American Journal of Cancer Research in 2015. The challenge for conventional oncologists is that they can't do anything about this. They do very little with angiogenesis, so they don't measure vascularity. There's a few chemotherapies, the major one is Avastin, that does affect angiogenesis, but other than that, they don't have too many tools. Chemo, radiation do not affect circulating tumor cells, so they're not going to measure those as well. And then, typically, they don't know much about nutrition, so, there goes that, right? So we need to be well informed. Cancer cells create their own nutritional supply, as I just mentioned, and cancer cells also are masters at resisting apoptosis. And the last one is cancer cells cause inflammation. And we'll look at this a little closer in a moment. Cancer is a cold disease, it's an inflammatory disease, and it's an acidic disease. Most of your cancer patients will have low body temperature. And at Hope for Cancer, we found the majority of them, their average body temperature is about 35.5 centigrade, very low. In Fahrenheit, that's about 96.5, 97 Fahrenheit. So we have to heat up our patients with saunas, with hyperthermia, with exercise, increasing metabolic activity. So you see here, with respect to inflammation, there are some factors here on top that these are inflammation-independent carcinogenesis, like DNA damage, hereditary. Genetics is only about 2 to 5% of all cancers, right? The rest is epigenetics. And then on the bottom here, you'll see inflammation-dependent carcinogenics, like microbial infections, autoimmunity, immune deregulation, and so forth. Both pathways impair apoptosis, activation of growth-promoting oncogenes, and inactivation of tumor suppressor genes. And they lead to advanced disease, all of which is chronic inflammation. So here they are, all 10 of them. And maybe in the next years we'll discover others, but now we know a lot. We have a lot to work with, right, in our treatment plan. So I like this slide because I typically say, what do we treat? Do we treat the cancer in the patient, or do we treat the patient with the cancer? Right? We treat the patient with the cancer. They treat the cancer in the patient, right? So it's a different philosophical approach, and of course, I know that we're right on, right? We're treating the patient with the cancer. Because if I live a day longer, or if I live 5 years, 100 years more, I want to live with good quality of life. And a lot of what we do is to increase the quality of life of our patients, because there's only so much that we could do with some of our patients. Although I've seen miracles, and we've seen miracles all the time, however, quality of life is important. 94% of our stage 4 cancer patients have significant improvement in quality of life. And that's a success already. So this is in my book. It's talking about the different factors that we need to focus on with respect to lifestyle, bioregulation, toxins and infections, of course, some genetics. So am I doomed to have prostate cancer because my father had prostate cancer? I'm not doomed. But I know potentially there's some genetic components there. So I need to be more strict in certain things. I'm not going to watch sports on TV every night eating a bowl of ice cream, right? Like my father and we grew up eating Tony the Tiger Frosted Flakes every morning, right? And canned tuna fish from when I could remember, grade school and high school, it was what we ate for lunch. So we need to change those so that the genes don't express themselves. And I'm sorry, the foundation of all this, in my experience, is at this level, the soul and the spirit. So my second book, which is, I've completed the second draft, it'll be out early next year, is about emotions and cancer. Because the first book that is here around, it's the 7 key principles to remove fear and empower your healing journey. So now we're going to write one book on each of those 7 key principles to dive deeper into that. So next year, if Dr. Lim, which I have to really applaud you and the organizing committee for this work, it's been a great day of conference, and if you invite me next year, we'll have another book on emotions and cancer. Can't wait for that. So here is the 7 key principles of cancer therapy published in a peer-reviewed journal out of UCLA. And that's why I said we're not quacks. We're doing science-based medicine. This was published in a peer-reviewed journal back in 2012, this Forum on Immunopathological Diseases and Therapeutics. And the 7 key principles, we'll go very quickly into them today. If you have the book, each of them have a symbol. So each chapter, you'll see the symbol corresponding to the principle. So if you're in the detox chapter, you'll see this symbol there, okay? As it is in the table of contents as well. So just a guideline, if you're more interested in one subject, you could follow along with that. So the 7 key principles are basic, non-toxic cancer therapies, immunomodulation, full spectrum nutrition, detoxification, and I believe that the first thing we have to detox is our mind, right? I often have been quoted to say, a negative thought can kill us faster than a bad germ. And this is before antibiotics existed, right? So a negative thought can kill us faster than a bad germ. And we have also oxygenation, restoring the microbiome. And when we talk about the microbiome, let's not forget the external microbiome. Of course, the internal microbiome, every area in our body is a unique microbiome, but we also have to but focus on the external microbiome that we're exposed to every day, right? And then the foundation of all this, as I said earlier, is the spiritual and emotional part. And oftentimes, this is what's lacking in most clinics or treatment centers because, this takes time, it's involved, and you have to bring the patient to that area of conflict resolution. So non-toxic cancer therapies, we do a lot of energy medicine, we do sound and light therapy, we do infrared spectroscopy, hyperthermia, intravenous cancer therapies, And photodynamic therapy is our claim to fame. We've been doing sono photodynamic therapy since the year 2001, treated thousands of patients with light and sound, and we could target tumors individually or collectively. Just so that you know, the mechanism of sonophotodynamic therapy will allow us to create cancer cell apoptosis, modulate both the adaptive and the innate immune system, disrupt tumor angiogenesis, have antimicrobial effects, and this is described on this side of the slide, activation of different parts of the immune system. So the sonophotodynamic therapy process is that we give the patients a substance that's non-toxic, natural. This could be done sublingually, it could be done intratumorally, it could be done intravenously, and of course topically. And once that is administered, then we wait a certain amount of time and we wake this substance up. Because these sensitizers are they're non-active, physiologically, chemically, or biochemically, until we give them a light source, a photodynamic therapy, or a sound therapy, and that wakes them up, and then you start having the release of reactive oxygen species within the cancer cells, and that leads to apoptosis or cytotoxic effects. Very non-toxic, selective accumulation in the cancer cell. Some studies that were done with this says that 70 to 1, 70 cancer cells will absorb the sensitizer for every 1 normal cell. When we wait 3 hours to 24 hours, depending on the sensitizer, the normal cell will release the sensitizer. So at the end, we're only affecting cancer cells. So just a picture showing LED laser beds that we use, infrared, red light, and more localized light. We use red, infrared, blue, yellow, green, and ultraviolet, depending on what sensitizer we use. And then here we use a sonotherapy device. So here we have a patient with a squamous cell carcinoma of the neck. And what we did is we did interstitial laser applications after doing a sensitizer called ICG, indocyanine green, that's non-toxic, and we gave it intravenously, and also we did it directly into the tumor. And this patient had about a 30% reduction in tumor mass after 1 week of treatment. So you see results oftentimes very quickly. This patient with a breast cancer, we use another sensitizer called chlorine E6, which is an extract of chlorophyll or sea algae. And then we use the high power 4-watt laser. And here we could also do the laser therapies intravenously. I know some of you have attended the ISLA conference, right? Some of you have, yes, with Dr. Weber. So basically I use his lasers, but we use other sensitizers and other type of photo and sonotherapy as well. We're doing ultrasound guided therapy. So this patient had a bladder cancer, and so through ultrasound we put the sensitizer directly into the tumor and then put the fiber optic laser into the bladder tumor. Typically there it's about a 45% reduction in tumor size with one treatment. This patient had a cancer of the head of the penis, and there we used the chlorine E6 we used 5-ALA topically, and really good results. This is a lower rectal tumor. It was about 9 centimeters from the anal verge, and so we're able to access it very nicely with the ultrasound. So there's a lot of potential applications and more direct targeted therapy, but remember, it's always a systemic therapy that will give us the long-term results, because cancer patients don't succumb to cancer from the primary tumor. Remember, we talked about that at the beginning. So we also have to treat any potential metastatic activity. Any of you heard of the photodynamic infrared spectroscopy, PDIS, some of you? This is one of the latest technologies that comes out of where? Germany, right? Everything seems to come from Germany. So photodynamic infrared spectroscopy is a technology that is used to detect circulating tumor cells, CTCs. And the way it works is that conventional circulating tumor cell tests like RGCC in Greece, Main Track in Germany, Cell Search in the US, they are looking at a laboratory perspective. You take a sample of blood, you ship it there, and 3 weeks or so later, they tell you what the CTCs are. The limiting factor with that is that it's only detecting epithelial circulating T cells. There's something called cancer stem-like cells, the cancer stem cells. There are two variants. There are epithelial and mesenchymal. And I talk about this extensively in the book, but it's a bit complicated to go over in this short amount of time. But suffice it to say that we're limited in the laboratory with just being able to detect epithelial circulating tumor cells. Whereas the photodynamic infrared spectroscopy, we're detecting both mesenchymal and epithelial circulating tumor cells. Also, we are looking at the total blood volume. So this test is done in real time. And we could look at the 5-6 liters of blood, and we could detect even one single circulating tumor cell. And at the same time, we can potentially kill that, destroy that circulating tumor cell. So the instrumentation is quite clear. We have the monitor, we have the spectroscope and a printer, and we use an intravenous laser and an external laser. And then the flow is here. This is a primary tumor. These are circulating tumor cells. When they leave the primary tumor, they have to transition from epithelial cells to mesenchymal cells, because they have to go through the extracellular matrix, the ground regulating system, and they have to penetrate the cell wall of the vascular structure. Once they do that, now they are called circulating tumor cells. Before they are in the bloodstream, they're not called circulating tumor cells yet. They're called either mesenchymal or epithelial stem cells. And they're fixed to the ICG, they're marked, and then we're able to detect with the spectroscopy those circulating tumor cells. Is this making sense? At the end, we'll ask for any questions. But this technology allows us to do three things. One is that we can screen patients. I have done this test on myself, and thankfully there were no detectable circulating tumor cells. Because see, we could detect circulating tumor cells before they become a tumor somewhere, right? They're circulating in the bloodstream. So it's a good way to recognize early if there's a potential for cancer development, because we know that mammography is not an early detection, right? Once a tumor is found by a mammogram, there's already billions of cancer cells, right? Because it has to be about 2 millimeters in size for the mammogram to see something. The second benefit of doing the PDIS is to confirm treatment efficacy. So you do a baseline test, you measure circulating tumor cell, and then you do one later on, 3 months, 6 months later, and you see how your treatment is working in destroying the circulating tumor cell that are leading to metastasis, which is killing 90% of the cancer patients. And then the third is it's also a therapy, because we are destroying the circulating tumor cells with the photodynamic infrared spectroscopy. I have to take a little breath, 1 second. So here's a patient, Angela, a young patient, 33 years old, diagnosed in September 2017 with stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma of the right breast. Remember, the right breast is what? The male side, right? So she has male-related conflicts. And left side, you know, is the female side, the mother-child, the nest. And so we have to look at that aspect also. And she She was actually a cheerleader for a professional American football team, very famous in the US, beautiful lady, long hair, but she was pressured into doing the conventional therapy with chemo and Herceptin and Perjeta. The tumor in the right breast reduced, but it was still there. At this time, she decided to come to us at Hope for Cancer. May 2018, we did our treatments, sonophoto, immunotherapies, and many things, all the adjunct therapies, ozone therapy, hyperthermia, PEMF, near-infrared sauna, the best program, B17 Laetrile. And at this time, we did not have the PDIS yet. So we just did our treatment. When she came back for a follow-up, September 11, 2018, then we did the PDIS, and her screening was negative. So that allows us to be confident that although she still had a breast tumor, that her risk of developing metastatic disease is minimal to none. And the new news now is that Angela is pregnant. And in November this year, she will be giving birth to her second baby. Something that the doctors thought was not possible because of her chemotherapy and all the drugs that she has. So what we do in a holistic approach is we're giving our patients even the ability to have children, to have good quality of life, right? Even though they still have that tumor there. So now the second key principle, that was the non-toxic therapies. The second key principle is immunomodulation, and this is quite simple, of course. We need to have a balanced immune system because a hyperactive immune system or an underactive immune system is not beneficial. So I like to use the word regulation versus homeostasis. I don't believe that homeostasis really exists. We learned that from Guyton and physiology and all that, but are we ever in homeostasis? We're not. We're in regulation, right? We're regulating every second of every day, and that's what has to happen with our immune system as well. So some of the therapies that we use for immunotherapy is, you've heard of GC-MAF. It's in some parts of the world is a bad word because I could say this in Malaysia, they've killed some doctors in the US and other places because of using GC-MAF, but it's a very effective therapy. Also, this is something that we developed with our work in South Africa with the HIV/AIDS patient. We call it Immune Power Plus. And our soda is another development of myself and my team, where we are taking antigens from the urine. Remember that the CEA, the CA125, the CA 2729, 125, CA stands for carcinoantigen. CEA stands for carcinoembryonic antigen. These antigens are emitted by cancer cells, and they're proteins. And so they're detected in blood, but they're removed from the body through the urine. So what we develop at Hope for Cancer is we collect the patient's urine and we extract the antigens from them. Then we make a serum from the antigens and reintroduce them into the body through an intramuscular injection, and they combine with the antibodies to form what's called an antibody-antigen complex. So now we're giving the antibodies immunological information to attack those cancers, detect and attack those cancer cells. So quite interesting, this therapy with respect to bioimmunotherapy using the patient's own antigens. Another quick trick is, anyone heard of, you heard of minor autohemotherapy, right? So one easy thing that's been around for many years is you take 10 mLs of blood from peripheral blood. You can or cannot combine it with ozone, it doesn't matter, but you take the 10 mLs from blood, and then you reintroduce it intramuscularly in the opposite side of the body, IM, and within 8 hours, you will have a 22% increase in macrophages, and that will sustain for 5 to 7 days. So you have an upregulation of macrophages, and if you do this with your patients every week for 10 weeks, And then you could do this like every couple months. You'll have a much better immune system. If there's a patient that's going to have surgery, you do this the day before the surgery and 5 days after surgery, and you can cut the antibiotic regimen by half. So instead of giving 10 days of antibiotic, post-surgery you could give 5 days, and the risk of infections is decreased tremendously, and this doesn't cost anything, it's just the patient's blood, right? So we can be creative in doing some of these therapies that have been around for a long time, but they fall down in the wayside. Salgina, I'll talk about that in a moment. So this is the step of the GC-MAF. GC-MAF is a macrophage activation factor. Cancer cells suppress the activation of the macrophages. You understand that macrophages are in every tissue and cell of our body, and they're the first line of defense. Cancer cells are able to suppress the macrophages from becoming active. Meaning, if you're in the police station, the policemen in the police station are waiting for the alarm so that they can go and do what the policemen do. But they need the alarm. Macrophages need that alarm so that they can go and kill viruses, bacteria, and cancer cells. But cancer cells suppress the policemen, the macrophages, from leaving the police station. So what we can do very effectively with GC-MAF, we call it Sunivera, right? We call it Sunivera, is that we can induce that stimulation of the macrophages. And we also provide vitamin D, of course, very important for the stimulation of the macrophages. I agree and concur with a lot of you. Our cancer patients need to have vitamin D serum levels at about 120, 140 or above. For all of us without cancer, minimum 80 to 100 will be acceptable. I've never seen toxicity to vitamin D levels, even in patients that have 190 or 200, that toxicity is not possible. So this is briefly what the GC-MAF does. The next treatment that we developed in concert with our colleagues in Germany is a protocol called Salgina. So this is an injection, which we use thymus. Remember the thymus gland, right? It involutes as we age. About the age of 50, the thymus gland production decreases, and the risk of cancer and chronic disease increases. So by combining thymus with peptides called epithelone, we're able to have significant immune effects. And then we have 2 other products that we use in conjunction with the thymus. And this is the information. The thymus therapy reverses the natural decay of our adaptive immune system, which is accelerated by chronic diseases like cancer. So as the thymus function decreases, cancer increases, right? And so we could, at age 50 onwards, the thymus operates at about 15% of its capacity or even below that, and that's when we have a significant increase in cancer incidence and chronic disease. So the epithelone, the second part of that injection, it increases the activity of telomerase. So one of the main features of this product is that it will elongate the telomeres. When we talk about longevity, we have to not forget the telomeres, and I know that there's a talk later on about telomeres. And so cancer is a shortening of our telomeres. And with this, we're able to elongate the telomere. There is, I'm not an acupuncturist, but remember the point here, what is it called? Stomach 3, is it? Stomach 3 point here. I learned this from Dr. Omura in Japan, that by tapping this point till your wrist hurts, and so both our cancer patients are doing this all the time. They're tapping their stomach 3 point, 33. Okay. And so they're able to stimulate telomere elongation, very important. What do we have here? This is another product that comes from Mexico. It's called Activa IC3, and basically this is nanotechnology. We're a brilliant doctor who actually patented the H1N1 vaccine. He developed this product from the shark. Remember, sharks have certain cells that don't permit them to get cancer. So this is a micronized nanotechnology product of the entire shark. And this comes in a vial. It's a powder. You dilute it with water and drink it. We also added, resveratrol, curcumin, and graviola to that compound. Very powerful immunomodulator. And then the star product that we have, and I carry that with me all the time, especially when I travel, is called TCM, T-cell modulation. This is the spleen of the shark. Significant benefits to health, and it has a patented technology. It's GMP. All this is manufactured in the U.S., in San Diego. And so TCM, what happens with TCM is that it works with the dendritic cells and prevents that immune evasion of the cancer cells. So actually the TCM is part of an immune activation therapy, and basically it's 6 sprays a day, every day. I have a friend who's one of my scientists from LA, and his son is 12. He had a pneumonia, went to the hospital at Cedars-Sinai in LA. Excuse me, they did all the antibiotics, all the treatment, and he got better, but still he was missing 2 days of school every week because of weakness. He had a cough, a lingering cough. We gave him the TCM. In 3 days, he was 100%. And so we've seen this over and over also with our cancer patients. So if any of you are interested in more information about this, we could send you all the, all the details and specs and everything on this product. But I think it's going to be a star product around the world because we're having excellent results with this at Hope for Cancer. And that's, there's more information on it here. Okay. This is the next key principle. It's on nutrition. I just want to tell you a few pearls on nutrition. I think we have to be careful and about when we say that sugar feeds cancer. I think it's said too loosely, and patients are paranoid about consuming anything with sugar. Almost everything has sugar. So there's 2 types of molecular rotations, a left spin and a right spin. When you take an amino acid, what's the letter in front of the amino acid? Carnitine, lysine, proline? L. L stands for levorotatory. That means the molecules spin to the left. The opposite of that is dextrorotatory. The molecules spin to the right. When someone gets the 2-fluoro, the glucose solution for the PET scan, that's a deoxyglucose. That's a right spin sugar. So the cancer cells absorb that, and the PET scan lights up. When Dr. Max Gerson, you all heard about the Gerson diet, or a lot of you, he gave a carrot juice every hour, every couple hours. Carrot juice is a high glycemic index sugar. So what happened there? Why is he doing this? He was a German, as you know, brilliant Max Gerson. And he knew that natural sugars cannot feed cancer cells. Only synthetic sugars, processed sugars. So left spin sugars are selectively absorbed by normal human cells. Right spin sugars are absorbed by cancer cells. So our patients, they could have fruits, they could have raw honey, unadulterated, they could have raw maple syrup, of course. 80% should be should be vegetables, and about 20% fruits. If it was that easy, that sugar feeds cancer, boy, our life will be great. We stop all the sugar. Have any of you tried that? Stopping all the sugar in your cancer patients? Any of you tried it? And did the cancer go away? No. Because what happens? And I don't know all the mechanisms, but we have a lot of clinical experience. We're in the trenches, we're seeing this. Cancer will feed from something else, proteins. So you stop the sugar, you stop the protein. Does the cancer cells die? No, I haven't seen it. Okay, so then you stop the fats also. You stop the sugar, you stop the protein, you stop the fat. Well, the cancer won because now the patient has no nutrients, right? And so we have to be very careful when we hear that the cancer feeds sugar. And in my clinical experience of almost 30 years, we do give our patients carrot juice. We allow them to have non-GMO, of course, pesticide-free, all that, some fruit. And then, if you believe in the garden, when God put the food in the garden, how could he put something in the garden that's good when you're healthy, but if someone has cancer, hey, don't eat that? What an all-loving, all-good, all-knowing God put something in the garden that later, if someone had cancer, which he surely knew that cancer was going to happen, now it's not good to consume that. So I asked a Bible scholar this question, and she said, Dr. Tony, that's illogical, right? So that's the spiritual part, if you believe that, and the medical part is the one about rotation. So that's my bit on sugar. You don't have to believe me if you don't want, but try it out, and your patients will be more compliant. They'll be happy if we give them healthy treats every once in a while, right? So these are some of the IVs that we use. Oh, she says I have an hour left. Is that okay? These are some of the IVs that we use. The ones I'd like to point out is olefinolia. That's olive water extract that comes from Italy. Very, very nice. We give it intravenously in our cancer patients. Boswellia or frankincense, we now are able to give it intravenously as well, okay? And we talked about curcumin, artesunate. This is ginger extract, very, very good to kill cancer stem cells, CTCs. Laetrile B17, you know, mistletoe, Helixor is the brand that I use in India, is very well known. And EGCG is like a main therapy that all of our cancer patients should have, and we're able to give that intravenously as well. The one that's missing here is the DCA that Dr. Fred talked about. We also use DCA as well. But avail yourself to intravenous therapies because especially in the stage 4 cancer patients, they need that boost. They cannot absorb well, and so we need to give them intravenous therapy. With respect to detox, the main one I want to talk about is don't forget, please, about the dental. And I know a doctor here will be very happy I said this. He's talking later. But root canals, there's never, ever a healthy root canal tooth. That has to come out. Secondly is cavitations. That's where there was a tooth. The tooth was extracted, the gum sealed, healed, but there was a pocket. And these cavitations are always, always infected. They might not be presenting clinical symptoms of an acute infection, but it's a chronic infection that's hampering the immune system every moment of every day. And then number 3, as you know about the metal fillings, and number 4 is periodontal disease. And in the US and probably around the world, about 70% of all people, of all of us, have some periodontal disease. So that's something we all need to please focus on. Oxygen therapies, you know, the main one that we like is ozone. We've done ozone in all ways that you could imagine. Hyperbaric oxygen chamber, very important as well. And never forget that we need to breathe. Most of us are shallow breathers, and if we take a deep breath, it kind of feels uncomfortable. So we need to teach our patients how to breathe, and there's a small section in my book about that. The microbiome, very importantly, it builds the immune system, it regulates metabolism, it improves the absorption and production of certain vitamins and minerals, it regulates obesity, it's anti-inflammatory, so working at the gut microbiome will decrease the incidence of all these diseases, and they work in synergy with each other. Emotions and spiritual. Well, the Titanic only saw what was under the water. And so it didn't see what was, it only saw what was on top of the water, not under the water. And so this is our reality. But only 10% of our reality is visible. 90% is hidden. And so let me tell you a quick story. There's a patient of ours, she was 63 years of age from Southern California, and she had right breast cancer. Remember I said that the right side is related to the male side. So I was learning this information about emotional implications to cancer. So I approached Phyllis, and she was a school teacher. She is a school teacher, and I asked Phyllis, is there any sexual abuse in the school, any bullying? And at that moment, she turned pale and started to sweat. I calmed her down, and then she told me, Dr. Tony, when I was 10 years old, I got sexually abused by my father, my grandfather, and my uncle. So now she's in her early 60s. For 50 years, they knew, the three of them knew, and she knew. And now I was the fifth person to know. I helped her release this conflict, and the tumor that we have been working on for 4 years to disappear hadn't disappeared to this moment. I don't understand it all, but I've seen time over time tumors disintegrate and leukemias go away when we uncover what's happening at this level of our patients. And it's so, so important. And as I said, that's the topic of my second book, which will be out next year. But I could give you story after story after story of how this work is so crucial in what we do. Do some of you agree with this? Yes? Okay. So we developed a program at Hope for Cancer called the BEST program, and it's behavioral, emotional, and spiritual. And so we're looking at the behavior of the patient, and if they're extrovert, if they're introvert, if they're yellow, blue, what type of personality traits they have. So that way we could abordar en español. No, we could focus on their personality traits so that they can cooperate with us in the emotional, spiritual aspect. Always having our 4 core values: faith, hope, love, and generosity. Cancer patients are typically givers. They don't know how to receive. And one thing I teach our cancer patients is now you have to learn how to receive. Receive love, receive the care. Love yourself, because they're givers, givers, givers. And maybe some of you have noticed this, but this is true for most of the cancer patients. They're givers. They need to learn how to receive. And about 10% of cancer patients will have what's called secondary gain from an emotional perspective. They like being sick because now their husband is not going out with his buddies, after work. He's coming directly home to care for the wife, or the kid who's in college is calling them, periodically, hey mom, hey dad, how are you? So they have a gain, right? A secondary gain for being sick. So we have to uncover these if it exists, because it's in about 10% of cancer patients that they have that secondary gain. So the BEST program is key, and I believe this is the most important factor of our 7 key principles. It's not the hormone balancing, it's not the nutrition, it's this. And if we're missing this, we can only get so far in the outcome that we want for our patient. So what else do we have left here? So these are the 7 key principles, and one thing I tell the patients is every day when you wake up, ask yourself, what can I do better today within the 7 key principles? What did I do yesterday to oxygenate? And what could I do better today? Well, I could eat more live green foods. I could take the walk. I could go hiking. I could, do therapies to oxygenate. What did I do yesterday on the emotional, spiritual? Did I forgive someone? That I affirmations, whatever it is. So every day, step it up a notch. Step it up a notch. Because a cancer patient, it's like a marathon runner. If this is the starting line and you're going to run a marathon, you can't think about the finish line because it's just too much. It's too far. You have to think about the first 5, 6 kilometers. Then think about the next 7 kilometers and so forth. So we have to teach our patient that it's a step process. We have to remove fear and we have to empower their healing journey. And if we do this, they'll be happy, we'll be happy, society will be happy, and then we know that we're doing our best, right? So with that said, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jimenez. We are about 45 minutes late on our schedule for this afternoon. So can we entertain just 1 or 2 questions?
Thank you, Tony. That
Thank
was
you,
an
Dr.
amazing lecture.
Antonio.
Oh, sorry. All right, ladies first.
Oh, sorry. Very excellent lecture. I feel very blessed and grateful to attend this lecture, to share, for you to share the knowledge of all of us here. I just want one question related to cancer stem cells. Lately, there's a lot of studies regarding metformin and its action on and mechanism as well as targeting the cancer stem cells. Are you using that, or are you familiar with that? Can you give comment? Because in this country, I would say it's one of the, well, it's still the cheapest drug to be used. Yeah. And is there a place for it? Thank you.
Yes, I think patient specific, and if you know that your patient is compliant, they're having a good nutrition plan, then I think metformin is a good option. We don't use it too much. Our patients are international patients. When they come to our clinic, they've traveled long distance. They're staying for 3 weeks. There's a lot going on, and we have to correct so many things. So I don't think that it should be the #1 line of therapy initially. Once the patient has stabilized, once you have them in a good nutrition program, once they're sleeping, once they're parasympathetic, sympathetic balance, then you could go into those therapies. Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Vijay?
Yeah, thank you. Awesome lecture. You covered A to Z of everything we needed to know. You mentioned about PDIS. Is there a false negative with PDIS?
It's very hard to have a false negative because when you give the sensitizer, when you give the ICG, indocyanine green, you need to run a test with the spectroscope, and you need to have the 3 peaks. If you have the 3 peaks, one is the activation peak, the second one is the fluorescent peak, and the third one is the phosphorescent peak. If you get those 3 peaks before starting the screening, you know that you have given enough ICG. And then you run the test, and at the end, you do another screening for the 3 peaks. So if you get the 3 peaks at the beginning and at the end, the test is completely valid. Can they be a false positive or negative? I think so, not because of the limitation of the technology. I think it's because of unknown factors. I think with any test, right, even biopsies, as you know very well, we could have not the true information. We've only done about 200 PDIS, which is probably the most any clinic has done in the world. And so we're waiting for 3 months and then 6 months and see if the patient was PDIS negative, that means no circulating tumor cells, what was their clinical progression in 3 months and 6 months? Did they develop further disease or metastatic activity? So that information is not available, nor has been done by the people in Germany. So we are doing that on our own now, and hopefully, within the next few months, we'll have more data.
Thank you. Thank you
Surely.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So can we now call on Dr. Homer Lim and Dr. Matia for the token of appreciation for Dr. Jimenez. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, we will have to sacrifice the break for more learning.